This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview. Joining us today is Tony Catachanas, the founding partner and CEO of Victory Hill, a private asset investment and advisory business specializing in investments in energy infrastructure and companies that accelerate energy transition to net zero. Well, hello, Tony. Thank you very much for joining us here on Stockbox. And I, first of all, perhaps get you to just introduce the company and tell us what you're all about.
Thanks, Mark, and appreciate the invitation. Thanks for having me. Thanks for making the time, and to all your listeners, hello to you all. Our firm is a firm that started its life in May of 2020 after spinning out a deal team from a large global bank. The large global bank was called Mizuho Financial Group. Mizuho is one of the three Japanese commercial banks, also known as the mega banks. They are Sumitomo, Mitsubishi, and Mizuho. And those three commercial banks are some of the world's largest lenders and some of the world's largest project financiers. And project finance is the discipline of financing infrastructure, in particular around the world. And Mizuho's activities, its core activity is to carry out project financing around the world, and in particular, within the energy sector. The energy sector, it should be said, is the largest infrastructure segment and part of the global infrastructure pie, and is very, very important, has been very fast growing over the last 50 to 60 decades. And we are seeing now continued growth in the sector. The deal team that we spun out is a deal team that was oriented towards financing and opportunities around the world that were predominantly led by what we call middle market energy companies. And we'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But we were tasked with helping deploy capital, advise on capital structures for transactions for specific assets, and indeed some corporate situations as well. And we did that on a global basis. And so the team spun out in May of 2020. We started our business with 6 founding partners, each with a different range of skill sets. The majority of us came out of the Mizuho camp. We added 2 additional individuals to complement the team and to add core skill and core business requirements. And we decided to launch our debut fund by way of a listing on the London Stock Exchange. And that debut fund today has just shy of $600 million of assets under management. It was IPO'd on the 2nd of February, 2021 on the main markets of the London Stock Exchange. It is also a green seal company, which effectively means that a large proportion of the earnings of the company are derived by investments in sustainable investments, sustainable assets. Today, we run over just over $700 million of assets under management, and that keeps growing quite fast. And we have a number of segregated mandates, which we manage for institutional investors. And we have a number of additional private funds that we're in the process of launching, which are of a private equity nature and infrastructure nature as well. And so the path for growth now is clearly established. We're on a runway now for quite extensive growth in the next couple of years.
Okay, well, very young company then, only a couple of years old, and launching the fund a little over a year ago. Was that on purpose? Was that well timed, considering the global events that, of course, has happened over the last 2 years?
Yeah, we had a lot of people ask us that question. We asked that question ourselves when we decided to leave a stable paying job and went to our partners, our respective partners, and said, "Listen, I think now's the time to do this, to embark on an entrepreneurial venture and forfeit, steady household cash flow." Luckily, all of us were in a position to be able to do so. And we had, established track records in carrying out this activity that then led to, the establishment of the firm. We found that there was a window of opportunity that we wanted to capture. We didn't want to stay on the sidelines as time moved on, as companies continued to evolve. And we wanted to jump on the opportunity to be able to capture really what we thought and still believe is a misunderstanding of the realities of the energy transition around the world. So we're in the business of educating investors. We're in the business of channeling capital, into sustainable energy to help facilitate an acceleration of the energy transition and help investors understand how to do that efficiently on a global plane. So the timing was good. I think we did an IPO raise and did an IPO in the middle of COVID at a time where people couldn't physically meet. And it was for many, of our advisors or corporate finance advisors and brokers and placement agents and whatnot. We were all breaking new ground in doing an IPO without having physical meetings was a bit challenging, but we were very successful. And we were the largest first-time manager, first-time raise within the listed fund space in the last 10 years as a result. So very, very successful, considering the situation and the environment we were in.
Indeed. Well, congratulations on getting that away. Of course, that fund, we can talk about that fund. That is how investors can of course get exposure to the investments that you're looking at. You mentioned the Green Seal. We're seeing a bit more of that these days. The whole green economy, as you say, the transition is significant, and we're still, I think, in very early stages. Now, I did do a podcast not so long ago with a commodities investor, and he did the figures, and he said a lot of very exciting things for this space. But one thing that stuck out was we need to create the investment of 6 United States of Americas if we're going to do this green transition, which is phenomenal. And it's going to be such an incredible time, I think, to be alive in this space. So let's just talk about the opportunity that you see there. I noticed from your website that you investment focus some new words here, some familiar words, but decarbonization, decentralization, electrification, digitization, and commoditization. So just tell us a little bit about the investment opportunity and the things that you're looking for, and also the criteria that you're looking for as well.
I'm going to try and debunk this, in a short period of time. But let's just start by saying that this is a sector in the economy that happens to be the second largest sector worldwide. After agriculture, energy is the second largest sector of the world economy, and is clearly a very important sector for the world economy. Contributes to economic growth in a very major way, benefits and contributes to things like inflation in an economy. And it is a sector that is so crucially important that understanding this sector well is not only important, but also very difficult. This is a high barriers to entry sector and industry. It is typically very poorly understood by investors and governments both. And we make a very concerted effort in educating investors about how to better debunk and understand how the global energy system is transitioning. So the themes that you've evoked that guide a lot of our activities, our investment activities, are effectively manifestations of the energy transition. The energy transition is a change in the global energy system. We are changing effectively our global energy system from a system that depends greatly on a particular energy source, typically of a hydrocarbon nature, towards a more sustainable one. And that transition is no small feat. This is a global process, a global phenomenon, but has a number of local requirements and local specificities. So this is not, something that we can do homogeneously around the world. It is a process that requires an understanding of how local economies have developed, how local energy markets have developed, how the histories, the economic history, and the broader social history of different countries have evolved over time to get to the current energy mix that they have, the dependencies that they have. And so what we specialize in doing here at Victory Hill is understanding those nuances and understanding how each individual energy market around the world has evolved over time and how it's responding to a change in the global energy system. And so our role is really to help channel capital in the right way within that context. The themes that you mentioned, as I said, are manifestations of the transition, and are broad themes that you can recognize and see within different local energy markets. For example, if you think about decarbonization, I think it is broadly accepted and recognized these days that we need to decarbonize our sources of power generation in particular, and our sources of energy more broadly. So we're now seeing trends towards moving towards EVs in certain parts of the world, not all parts of the world. There are many parts of the world, more parts of the world, arguably, that are not yet transitioning or facilitating or don't have the infrastructure to be able to facilitate a transition for household transportation or retail transportation, short haul transportation towards electric dependency. But it is happening in some parts of the world. So we're seeing different levels of decarbonization. The penetration of renewable power generation is another manifestation of that. We're seeing in the context of electrification, a greater dependence on power, on electricity as a source of energy. And so as we've evolved our technologies, our dependencies on technologies, we're seeing an increased digitalization of the consumer. And the consumer, I mean more broadly here, I don't mean just individuals, you and I also mean companies, businesses are increasingly using digital tools and digital processes that consume more power. And so the consumption level of how we consume energy these days has also increased quite dramatically, and is no longer subject to peaks. We have, if you think about it, mobile phones that depend on cloud infrastructure, which is switched on all the time and constant, around the clock. And we're much more digitalized, and that consumption pattern has changed the needs of energy that we have. There's a greater need, a greater dependence on electrification as a result. Decentralization and commoditization are somewhat linked. Let me explain that and debunk those in particular. Decentralization is about the understanding that not every energy mix being equal. Some parts of the world don't have an energy infrastructure or grid system that provides access to the grid to everybody or all participants in an economy. And you see this in particular in countries that are less developed, for example, economically, that haven't had the benefit of being able to build their grid infrastructure over time. As we have here in the UK, for example. The UK is one of the oldest grid systems on the planet. The US, even in a US context, my home country, we see a grid system that is typically harnessed by state, and doesn't actually fully cover the country. And so decentralization is about less dependence on the grid system and having the notion of rooftop solar panels and being able to be energy independent and decentralize basically the dependency on large centralized power generation sources to smaller embedded co-located power generation sources. And so that is becoming by far around the world the fastest growing trend on the planet and in the energy sector. Decentralization, co-location of power generation, it is happening everywhere on the planet, regardless of the evolution of an economy. It is fast growing, and it is the fastest growing trend. And last but not least, commoditization. We never thought of power or the electron as a commodity because very simply we couldn't export it. Power generation was usually a local story, was a very localized story. It is a commodity by all measures, but it's a commodity that never was prone to export. And so now we're starting to see through interconnections, grid interconnections, which are basically cables that connect two grid systems with each other. or moving or transitioning power generation into ammonia, using hydrogen and so on, and other commodities in a chain, we can now export electrons. Battery storage as well as another way. We haven't thought about exportation in that context, but it is happening. And so we are now thinking of electrons as being exportable. So you can buy power from another place and sell it to another place that you've generated it from. So that is a concept that people are increasingly getting comfortable with. So those are the themes. Those are the sorts of things that we tend to think about here at Victory Hill, that we spend our time on, and how we try to debunk those realities basically for investors.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I wonder if we can just finish off by perhaps if you could make the investment case for investors. I think, first of all, where they can go to find out more information, also how they can get access to the fund. But perhaps if you can, three reasons maybe as to why you're a good investment, what your ultimate objective is for the fund.
Yeah, so we participate in situations where we, having said everything I've said so far, which is recognizing the energy transition, recognizing energy trends, and understanding that, and understanding the local situation of an energy market within the context of a global transition. And being able to focus on parts of the economy, in particular the middle market, where we can see the majority of the innovation coming from, where we can see the majority of the growth coming from in the sector, and the guys who are, or the participants that are driving the transition, are clearly in the middle market. And that is broadly recognized, I think, in the sector. So we're participating. In addition to that, we provide an overlay of assessing individual investments where we concentrate on fundamentals, and those fundamentals are supply-demand fundamentals. We go into a market and we ask the very basic question of, is this particular middle market energy company answering a demand factor? Are they answering the demand for something that is or happens to be in very, very short supply? And if that is the case, then we try to obviously support that scenario. But that is a fundamental scenario that allows economic returns to be well underpinned for a significant period of time. Meaning, we're not trying to capture a cycle or a short-term, spike in demand. We're trying to capture fundamental demand for something that is fundamentally undersupplied. And if we can supply that thing that people want, then you're in a very good position economically. Your returns are superior. Those are the situations that we spend a lot of time focusing on. The last thing we do is, within the context of infrastructure that is very different, is we spend a lot of time, wearing a private equity hat, funnily enough, where we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can optimize an asset. So we're buying an asset, and unlike a lot of other infrastructure investors, that traditionally would buy these assets and just have a long-term contract on the assets, we ask the question, are we going to sit on a 20-year contract that has a fixed price or even a subsidy, and do nothing? We don't like those situations. We like a situation where we can buy an asset and put in additional capex, or get involved in recontracting the asset to drive greater returns. And so in that context, we're looking for specific situations, specific scenarios where we can help and contribute to the growth and drive returns for investors. And so those are the things that we focus on. Those are the things that we deliver in terms of value for investors in general.
Okay. And how can people get exposure to the fund? Is there a ticker code that they need to look out for on the LSE?
So we have a ticker on the LSE. It's GSEO. Speak to your brokers. If you are interested in participating, we are on a number of well-established platforms, intermediary platforms that you can have access to. Speak to your brokers and have a look around. You will certainly find us. We've made ourselves quite available to to as many investors as possible. So, and if for whatever reason we hear that we're not as available as we should be, we'll work on that, and we'll make an effort to make sure that that is the case.
Okay. Well, Tony Catachanas, the founding partner and CEO of Victory Hill, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.